Metacognition research. This is the knowledge and control that individuals have over their own learning and thinking. This is an abstract thought process, so anyone under the age of 7 will struggle to understand it, and it should be taught over time to allow students to gain the skills needed to learn the information and process it. Students will make predictions, learn to visualize and verbalize, learn to take good notes, which include mapping, graphic organizers, mnemonic devices, and self-meditation. Learning Disability Law Timeline. In 1975, education of all handicapped students entitled all children to a free and inappropriate education and a least restrictive environment, including those with disabilities, as well as protecting the rights of children with disabilities. In 1973, Section 504 Civil Rights Act was passed, and this prevented the discrimination against those with disabilities in programs that receive less federal funding. This does not require parental consent, and there is less specific criteria to receive services. In 1990s to 2000s, IDEA was designed to provide a government service for individuals with disabilities in the field of education. It requires an IEP, parental consent, as well as it must fit the criteria. This act is enforced by U.S. Department of Education. In 2000, No Child Left Behind Act was passed, and this keeps schools held accountable regarding the student's progress. Schools must submit a yearly report that is available to the public. Funding can be revoked based on the school progress. Parental rights and laws. Parents have the right to be given a copy of their rights, and their rights include the children's records being kept confidentially. They may review and inspect the records. They can have copies of all records as well as the documentation regarding their child. They can release records if they obtain permission from the school in writing. They must be notified in advance of any meeting that pertains to the child. They can request an assessment of their child, then request an independent one if they do not agree with the districts. They can have input with their child's IEP. They can refuse special education services. They can request a hearing if there are disagreements in regards to their child placements or services. So basically, if a parent is not happy with what the school is doing or providing for their child, they're allowed to challenge that, get it changed, and get it right for their kid, so their kid is not being left behind. The student's rights. The student has the right to due process. They can be heard in defending themselves, and they are allowed access of all documents regarding their charges. They have the right to be treated with respect and courtesy. They have the right to a prompt hearing, a safe learning environment, and a free appropriate education, and accommodations for their learning disabilities. And then Section 504 versus the IDEA. Section 504 is a Civil Rights Act, whereas IDEA is an education act to provide students with services. IDEA protects those from ages 3 to 21, while 504 protects people of all ages. They provide free and appropriate public education, but IDEA provides funding to implement the services, and 504 does not. Teachers' rights and obligations. Teachers' rights. They have the right to be treated respectfully by their students. They have the right to be able to teach and work in a safe environment. And the obligations are to notify the parents of beginning evaluations who set up an IEP and to follow the guidelines in the IEP. Basically, whatever services are set to provide an IEP meeting, they have the obligation to do those and follow those. The purpose of a behavior intervention plan, BIP. The purpose of a BIP is to address significant problems a student is having and come up with ways to help the students. A behavior intervention program is a legally binding document. Once it is signed by the parent, it can keep the school from being held responsible for a student's behaviors. Basically, this is a plan that's being come up with between the teacher and the student, parents and administrator, and they're all agreeing on certain steps and rules to follow in the event of a student behavioral outburst. Basically, they're agreeing on what is the best thing for the student to do so they can successfully behave in the classroom. MET, Multidisciplinary Evaluation Team. These people are responsible for evaluating students that may qualify for special education services. The team is made up of people who specialize in different areas, i.e., school psychologist, special education teacher, general education teacher, administrator, and additional service providers such as occupational therapists or speech therapists if necessary. REED, Review of Existing Evaluation Data. This is used by IEP team before their initial evaluation of the student, then again when they reevaluate the student, as well as if they think a student should end special education services. REED requires parental consent when used for an initial evaluation. IEPT, the Individual Education Program Team. This is a group that will create the student's IEP. It includes a parent, general education teacher, special education teacher, school district representative, a school psychologist, and potentially a student as well as or depending on their age. This is a team that creates the IEP and reevaluates them. Initial IEP versus transition IEP. The initial IEP. The initial IEP is the first time a student is considered for special education services. A student must first be evaluated to decide if they meet the criteria necessary to qualify for services. Once the student is evaluated and it is decided that they would benefit from special education services, the IEP can be drafted. The goal of the IEP is to allow a student to progress forward each school year and determine what services are necessary to do so. Now, the main goal of an IEP, or what should be a main goal of IEP, is to get the student out of special education. So whatever steps need to be taken in order to make that happen is what should be on the IEP. Annual review IEP. This must happen every year. During the review, the team must determine if the student is making progress towards their goals and how the student has progressed. The IEP will be redrafted to include new goals for the student as well as any change that will need to be made. If more accommodations need to be added, or if the student no longer needs a certain accommodations. Basically, this is a yearly checkup, I would say. It really helps the team to make sure that the student is doing the best that they can and is having the best results that they can possibly have. And if not, they change it so that way it can make it happen. Re-evaluation IEP. This can occur if there are conditions that make one necessary, such as the student performance increases, or at the parent's request. If the parent feels that their student is not being pushed hard enough or is being pushed too hard, they can ask for re-evaluation and for a change. Manifestation determination. Manifestation determination occurs when a student with an IEP may be suspended or expelled due to behavioral issues. This process determines whether the behaviors are related to the student's disability or not. The IEPT team meets to go over the information and to try to determine this. This happens either at or before 10 days of missed school, either consecutive or non-consecutive. Due process hearing. Due process for students with an IEP is projected by IDEA. Due process only happens after a decision cannot be made by mediation. The school district and the parent of the student with the IEP present their evidence in front of the hearing officer. If a decision still does not seem fair to the parent, it can be appealed all the way to the federal level. Addendum to IEP and progress reporting. IEP addendums are used to make minor changes to an IEP while the year is in effect. Progress reporting for students with IEP must occur as often as general education students are informed of their progress. Typically, it is twice a year since most gen ed students are on semesters and receive report cards twice a year. All right, and that does it for this screencast. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a great day.